with us on this Monday edition of Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Hope you had a wonderful and blessed Thanksgiving with family and friends, as we did. And, of course, the news cycle continues, and there was a horrific shooting and murder in Colorado Springs, Colorado, at a Planned Parenthood clinic. 3 people dead, 9 injured. When is this country going to come to grips that maybe we should have federal security at these facilities that provide women's health care in this country? I mean, that's what it's come to. That's where the conversation needs to go, because these shootings, apparently they don't seem to be less in number. You know, on one hand, we have got the mainstream media telling the American people that what candidates say matters. Yet we don't really put a whole lot of stock in all the hateful rhetoric towards Planned Parenthood clinics. You can't have it both ways. And I think the perfect example of this is the Reverend Mike Huckabee, a former Baptist minister who wants to be president of the United States. He sees no connection whatsoever between the hateful rhetoric out there and what's happening at Planned Parenthood clinics around the country, that certainly no one wants to see anybody get killed. That's what he counters with. Let me ask you, Mr. Huckabee, when you're in church and you're preaching, do you want people to believe what you say? When the federal government allows the Republican Party to hold this country hostage for funding the government unless we defund Planned Parenthood, you think that that's not going to have an effect on some radicals out there who have firearms and who think because the government's going to be shut down because the Republicans said it was going to be, I better get my firearm out there and do something about it? Don't tell me that there's no connection between the hateful rhetoric that goes on with Republicans in this country towards women in this country and Planned Parenthood. It's simply, there is clearly a connection. And the Republicans are in denial. So this is how Huckabee spins the whole thing.
I don't know of any pro-life leader, any. If you can tell me one, please correct me. But I don't know of anybody who has suggested violence toward Planned Parenthood personnel or some act of violence toward their clinics. I've not heard that, not from one single pro-life person. I've heard universal condemnation, whether it's from the Centers for Medical Progress that put out the videos, whether it's from pro-life advocates, and I consider myself one of them. I know of nobody who has ever suggested that Planned Parenthood be the target of some type of violent attack. So let me ask you this, Mr. Huckabee, Mr. Preacher. You don't think it's suggested violence when you tell people that they're not going to get their Social Security checks? You think that it's to cut people off of assistance who deeply depend on it? You don't view that as a violent act? I guess we have to define the word violence. The fact of the matter is that the Republicans are way out of step in this country, and the rhetoric that they have thrown on our society is resulting in shootings like this. For more on this, let's turn to Katrina Vanden. Heuvel. She's the editor, part owner of The Nation magazine. I want to get her take on this situation and the rhetoric and the way the right is spinning all of this as if, well, gosh, we got to hold, presidential candidates in check with what they say because words matter. But over here, it's okay to just go after Planned Parenthood and anything we don't philosophically line up with. Katrina, good to have you with us today.
Thank you, Ed, and I hope you had a good Thanksgiving weekend. You know, the Colorado shooting comes amid an alarming, horrific escalation of anti-abortion violence. We need to put it in that context. Ever since this anti-abortion group called the Center for Medical Progress released a series of covertly filmed videos, sting videos, essentially, we've seen threats and attacks on clinics, and abortion providers they've risen dramatically. So I do think the firestorm of hate that you spoke of and cited, Ed, has had consequences. And I think we need to focus, as you said, on those in this campaign who are inflaming and exploiting voters' fears and prejudice and appealing to the basest instincts of their supporters. And we see that in this attack, these killings, and enough.
Well, and there didn't seem to be any quick condemnation of any of these activities, any of this shooting that took place in Colorado from any of the Republicans right away. How long does it take to come to a conclusion that this is horrific and that this is an attack on the law? It's an attack on women's rights in this country. You know,
I mean, there was also a discussion that I was on a CNN reliable sources yesterday talking about Trump and how lies are the foundation of his campaign, how he has refused to back off his lies about thousands of American Muslims cheering after the World Trade Center towers came down. He, in fact, lied again on Meet the Press when he said that the administration is seeking to bring 200,000 Syrian refugees into this country. He really is a master of the big, ugly lie. But, Carly Fiorina, who, here's where media complicity plays a role. She has lied her way through 2 debates, accusing Planned Parenthood of, quote, butchering babies for body parts. She has lied about what she saw. She claims she saw a video, Planned Parenthood doing such things, which is a lie straight out. But yet there is a politeness in the media so that there's reference to her incorrect allegations or inaccuracies. I mean, even Jonah Goldberg, someone who has supported many of these right-wing candidates, said she was fudging the facts. I mean, he couldn't evade that. So I'm just saying, I think, there are consequences for this incendiary, hateful talk, which doesn't mean clamping down, but it means demanding that the media hold these people accountable, asking again and again of Carly Fiorina, for example, what did you see? What did you see? May that come up in the 3rd debate, by the way. I mean, I don't think politeness plays a role. I think silence or politeness is essentially complicity in these times with these candidates.
Well, there's no doubt that what Trump is doing, it's dangerous rhetoric, it's unnecessary rhetoric, and the lies are mixed right in there, and it plays right into the fear-mongering that has propelled a lot of his candidacy. I mean, the fanatics are behind him, the fearful people in America who are low-information voters. This is Trump defending his position in Sarasota, Florida over the weekend.
Because I talked about Muslims that were celebrating over in parts of New Jersey, and everybody knows it's true. And by the way, I had hundreds of tweets and hundreds of phone calls to my office saying, Mr. Trump, it's true. They said, I saw it. So I made the statement, and a lot of people saw it. Did anybody see it reported? People saw it. He knew. And by the way, everybody admits, worldwide, the Muslims were absolutely going wild.
Absolutely going wild, and using Twitter as a source of information to back up his rhetoric. He's
also using his own social media circles. I mean, he's built an alternate reality. There's this kind of right-wing, media ecosystem which exists out there. Now there's a Trumpian right-wing media ecosystem which seems designed simply to service his lies. I mean, think about it. People have a right to their own opinion, but not to their own facts. But there is such distrust, this is the case, Ed, of media among many people. Now, some of that may be fair, because I do think, and all of this BS about, quote, so-called liberal media bias ignores the fact that what we're really up against is a kind of corporatized media which is rigged against the public interest and fails to talk about big issues, is giving us false equivalence and false balance, sensationalism. And I think what you get when you get a Trump, you realize there has to be a course on how do you cover demagogues. We've seen them before in our history, but this guy is a master of the big, ugly lie, and he's denigrating groups of people. Now, listen, you know better than anyone because you travel the country. There is anger in this country.
No question.
There's anger because people feel economic and social changes have hurt them. Thousands of people haven't seen their wages grow. They've seen them stagnate. But how you deal with that is not through hate and fear. And I think our media too often, too much of it, sets it up as one of fear and, hatred and pitting people versus each other as opposed to trying to find solutions or ideas. And you get people like Trump or Carly Fiorina, and instead of saluting an organization which has helped women's reproductive rights for decades, marking its 100th anniversary this coming year, you see this hatred, which leads to something like Colorado Springs.
Trump has dipped a little bit in the polls, but he still is ahead of the field, and it looks like he's going to steamroll his way to the nomination. I mean, I don't see anyone tripping him up. If this doesn't trip him up, he's dipped a little in the polls, but he's still ahead of everybody else. And, of course, he has the resource to maintain it. We'll see how it goes. Katrina, always good to visit with you. Thank you so much for your time here on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Katrina Vanden Heuvel with us here. Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this production. When we come back, more on Trump and the Syrian refugees. Now that Ben Carson has gone over and seen the light on exactly what's going on, will his solutions work? And also more on the shooting in Colorado Springs. That's next. Stay with us. Hey, folks, you've heard me talk about BioGreen Clean. I'm going to show you right now on my airplane just how tough this is. I want you to keep in mind, chemical-free, 100% plant-derived, biodegradable. It is the safest cleaner that you can get, and it's the most effective. Go to our website, wegoted.com, or go to biogreenclean.com, www.biogreenclean, and order today. It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
Good to have you with us here on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. What is the attraction of any of these candidates? There's always that question in the minds of Americans. Why do I support X, Y, or Z? Trump is really appealing to the rabid base. When he says something radical, and then he sells it again and again. And the fact that he doesn't back down, I think, is a big attraction from this radical crowd. Here he is on Meet the Press.
Where did you see this?
Chuck, I saw it on television. So did many other people. And many
Jersey
people.
City.
Hundreds
You saw Jersey
in the area.
City.
I also heard Patterson. Excuse me.
Okay.
I've heard Jersey City. I've heard Patterson. It was 14 years ago. But I saw it on television. I saw clips.
If I said, well, people have said Mr. Trump's not worth $10 billion, and people were saying, you would say that was crazy. You wouldn't make a business deal based on retweets and based on hearsay. You're running for president of the United States. Your words matter. Truthfulness matters. Fact-based stuff matters.
Chuck, take it easy, Chuck. Just play cool. This is people in this country that love our country that saw this by the hundreds. They're calling and they're tweeting.
Joining us now is Jan Schakowsky, Congresswoman from Chicago, Illinois. Congresswoman, good to have you with us.
Good to be here. I saw that yesterday live, and I was just absolutely astonished. This kind of just made-up story. And as you said, he repeats it, and he repeats it, and people nod their heads, and they send it out on social media to each other. And, whether it's credible or not, they believe it.
Well, this plays right into the Republican playbook. You can't raise taxes on the job creators. Obama's going to take your guns. Planned Parenthood is doing things that, the lies are abound. And Absolutely. So I think the attraction that Trump has is that when he does this, he doesn't back down and just emboldens the ignorance of those who are following him. Your thoughts?
That's what they love about him. Actually, people have said, I've seen interviews where they don't really care if it's true or not. They like the fact that he sticks with his guns, literally, almost, and that he will not, he won't change his view. They appreciate that. They feel like that indicates a winner, a tough guy. This is the guy I want to be with in a battle.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, Ben Carson goes overseas. And I've said all along that this refugee question from Syria plays right into the immigration debate in this country. The Republicans don't want immigration reform. They'll talk a good game, but when it comes to it, they'll never sign on to it because they want cheap labor, and they certainly don't want these workers signing up into unions. So they have to stop at the borders no matter what the situation is. So Carson goes overseas to Jordan, and he finds out what? Well, these refugees really want to go home. Really? Really? Of course they want to go home. Tell us something we don't know. They're leaving because of the violence and because they've been targeted. Then he says that there's not enough money being spent and that we need to spend more money on it. Here he is.
It seems like everybody in the international community is spending more time saying, how can we bring refugees here, rather than how can we support a facility that is already in place. Jordan could take a lot more of the refugees than they're taking right now. I don't see any reason, quite frankly, that some of the other nations in the area shouldn't also be asked to do it, so that you don't have to go through a big cultural change with them. And in terms of money, when I looked at the refugee camps in Jordan, there's about a $3 billion shortfall annually. That's how much money we spent last year on Halloween candy. Okay. I mean,
so the simplicity continues with Ben Carson. Obviously, refugees don't want to leave their country. They're leaving for a reason. And the reason why this country should take some refugees on is because we are a player in this, and we need to lead, and we need to win the hearts and minds of these people and prove to the world that we are of good nature and always will be when it comes to human rights. Congresswoman, your thoughts on all this?
Oh, absolutely. I had the privilege of the Friday before Thanksgiving going to a dinner sponsored in my neighborhood by Move On with two refugee families from Syria that have been resettled in my community, mother, father, and children. And I said to them, I just wish that all of my colleagues could be here at this dinner and see just a real family dinner, kids running around, everybody feeling friendship and camaraderie. These are families that have been through hell and back and have come to this country and want to be part of it and want to work. Yes, at some point they want to go back to their country. That is not possible now. The other falsehood that Ben Carson said, the countries in the region are being flooded with these refugees and doing their best. And yes, we ought to support them monetarily, but they cannot absorb all them. And finally, let me say, since 9/11, 750,000 people have been resettled in the United States as refugees, and not one of them has been accused of anything even close to terrorism. 2,300 Syrians have come. None of them have been accused of anything. And so, if we want to protect ourselves here at home, we probably ought to require that people that are on the terrorist watch list not be able to get guns, which over 2,000 have already applied for gun permits. I mean, it's absolutely crazy, but the NRA has stopped legislation that would prevent them from getting guns. So we're just barking up the wrong tree here.
Congresswoman, I want to shift now to the shooting in Colorado Springs, Colorado over the holiday. 3 people dead, 9 injured. The rhetoric that has surrounded Planned Parenthood clinics, I believe, has played into this action. There's no question about it. The rhetoric that has been ramped up by the Republican Party and by those who do not believe that women in this country should have a right to take care of their own body. I mean, that's really what it boils down to. But I think moving forward to prevent these kinds of things from happening, when are we going to have the conversation, and I want your thoughts on this, about delivering federal security to these facilities around the country if they're going to be targets of violence?
Well, Well, first of all, let me just say I think have the privilege, maybe it's dubious, of being the ranking Democrat on the select committee that is now going to be looking into not only Planned Parenthood, but scientific research with fetal tissue and all kinds of providers that give women's health, and the inflammatory rhetoric that's been around this. I haven't seen this since Roe v. Wade has passed, and I've been around a long time. And there's no question in my mind that this attack on women's health, women's reproductive rights, has been a problem. I haven't really thought about or talked to these clinics, because it's not just Planned Parenthood that they're after, about the idea of some kind of federal law enforcement having a presence there. One thing we don't want to do is have all kinds of weapons and make these look like they're so guarded that women are afraid to go there. We want to make sure that they still maintain, and it's a delicate balance, a welcoming kind of an atmosphere. And Planned Parenthood,
and I made this point earlier. On one hand, we're telling presidential candidates that words matter. The mainstream media is basically saying, hey, you got to be held accountable for what you're saying. Yet on the other hand, when all this rhetoric is surrounding shutting down the government, not getting a budget unless we defund Planned Parenthood, I mean, these are radical things that, I believe inspire people to do radical things and violent things. But I don't hear any of the Republicans saying, maybe we better tone it down. I don't hear that.
No, I don't hear that either. I heard Cecile Richards this morning talking about how, yes, they do have security. They feel that women are still feeling comfortable all weekend. Women did go to Planned Parenthood clinics, so certainly we want to look at that. But you're right. You're absolutely right that this is a constitutional right to abortion, but mostly 97% of what Planned Parenthood does is preventive services, primary care, women going for family planning, that they're not really for that either. They've zeroed out Title X, which is family planning funding, in their budget. They've cut back on Teen Pregnancy Prevention Act. They've cut by 80%. What is wrong with these people?
This is Vicki Coward. She is the president and CEO of the Rocky Mountain Planned Parenthood Clinic.
Are you talking about politicians?
I think politicians have been in that conversation, and I mean, that the airwaves are full of anti-abortion language, of anti-Planned Parenthood accusations, much of which is false in nature. And we at Planned Parenthood are first and foremost a healthcare provider. We provide life-saving services to all kinds of folks, men and women across our communities, and the tirades against Planned Parenthood in the last few months have really been over the top.
They have been terribly over the top, and now we have this on our hands. Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, I'll give you the final word here.
Well, I do think that we need to address this issue of all kinds of inflammatory rhetoric on all fronts, on refugees, on Planned Parenthood, against the President of the United States, that this is not productive for our country. It is anti-American to do that, and that everybody's got to, I heard Donald Trump tell Chuck Todd, just calm down, calm down. That's exactly what these Republican candidates need to do, and maybe learn a few facts in the meantime.
Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, always good to visit. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
You bet. When we come back, more on the Planned Parenthood Clinic in Colorado Springs and what their future plans are. Stay with us. This is Ed Schultz, News and Commentary.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
The Ed Schultz Internet broadcast is brought to you by the Ring of Fire radio show. Listen to the Ring of Fire weekends on radio stations across the country. Get more information and the news of the day at ringoffireradio.com.
Do words matter? If they do, have the Republicans and the conservatives gone over the top when it comes to the conversation about Planned Parenthood in this country, playing the fear card that the government's not going to be able to function unless we shut these clinics down? This is Vicki Coward, again, who's the president and CEO of the Rocky Mountains Planned Parenthood, talking about the hateful speech that has played into this.
We've experienced so much hateful language, hateful speech. Such a negative environment has been created around the work that Planned Parenthood does, around the idea of safe and legal abortion. And we've seen that across the country from all sorts of speakers in the last few months. I can't believe that this isn't contributing to some folks, mentally unwell or not, thinking that it's okay to target Planned Parenthood or to target abortion providers.
Joining us now is Dawn Laguens. She is the Executive Vice President of Planned Parenthood Federation of America and the Planned Parenthood Action Fund. Dawn, good to have you with us on Ed Schultz News and Commentary.
Hi, Ed.
What was the atmosphere in Colorado Springs, Colorado, before the shooting? Was there a sense of hostility? And has there been? And has this hateful speech that we have seen in this attack on Planned Parenthood played into an attitude change in America that would bring hostilities towards the clinics? Your thoughts?
Well, I think, first of all, Ed, I just need to say that our hearts are primarily focused at this moment still on the families of the victims, those who are recovering, and, of course, grateful to the law enforcement folks who really made this less of a tragedy than it could have been. So thanks to them. I do think that Colorado Springs, clearly that community has come together incredibly around this circumstance, but that there have been a history of protesters and anti-abortion sentiment. But I think it's much broader than that, as others of your guests have said, which is that, the hateful rhetoric, and we heard Ben Carson just on the news earlier today talking about how hateful rhetoric is fueling the conflict in the Middle East and how it fuels the conflict in this country, and that is in fact true. And so I do worry that whether this person was an individual taking cues from that kind of talk, and especially the kind of outrageous and offensive and untrue things that have been particularly carried in this presidential primary.
So moving forward, what do Planned Parenthood clinics need to do that they're not doing to protect themselves against violent acts like this?
Well, two things I would say is that the safety of patients and staff is our top priority, and we have already strong security measures in place to make sure that our health centers are safe, and the staff there has been praised from the minute this thing happened by law enforcement, by the security experts who were watching alongside, for the measures that they took to get everyone in those health centers back behind locked doors to try and keep them safe, and that their training really had paid off and that the design had really paid off. And I think you heard that the cameras that we deploy in our health centers were then used by law enforcement to actually isolate the gunman and ultimately bring this to a close. On the other hand, I think it's kind of that you're asking an absurd question, but there is absurdity in the question of, how can we further fortify health centers and schools and theaters and all of the places that are suffering these attacks, rather than a real focus on how can a likely deranged person walk around with an AK-47 and threaten these places. And it just is a little bit of a kind of blame the victim thing to say, now what other measures can we take to arm Planned Parenthood?
Do you believe that the rhetoric surrounding Planned Parenthood is inflaming the hearts and minds of these twisted people that are committing these acts? Do you think that the political conversation has played into this?
I share the concern I think that many Americans have that extremists are creating a poisonous environment that feeds this kind of attacks on women. Now, this one turned out to be obviously incredibly violent, but women at many health centers, whether they're going for an abortion or birth control, face people standing there yelling at them, seemingly with nobody from law enforcement or anybody saying, hey, that's not cool, or anybody in the community. And that all contributes to an idea that it is okay to terrorize and shame and intimidate women. And as we heard Loretta Lynch, our Attorney General, said, this was a crime against women seeking health care.
And Dawn, do you think that this will diminish the usage and the accessibility to Planned Parenthood clinics around the country, that there will be a fear factor here and maybe women won't access these services the way they could and should?
Well, that is something we absolutely don't want to happen, and that, of course, is often the intention of terrorists and of the kind of people who say these hurtful and harmful things. But the great news is the day after this shooting took place, 28 of 29 health centers in the Rocky Mountain area and health centers all across America, their doors were open. Their doors were open yesterday, and their doors are open today. And so one of the things is, luckily, most women, the vast majority of our 700 health centers and the millions of people who come to us, will never see a protester, will obviously never encounter any violence. We have a great safety record, but it can create a climate where people worry. And so that's one of the things that we want to do, is both reassure people about the safety and security of our centers, but also to say we've got to stop terrorizing women who are trying to get their legal health care in this country.
Dawn Laguens, I appreciate your time on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. Thanks so much. All the best.
Thank you, Ed.
Bye-bye. Executive Vice President of Planned Parenthood Federation of America and Planned Parenthood Action Fund, Dawn Laguens, with us here. Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, Bio Green Clean, and the iSave team bring you this production. We're back tomorrow. Have a good one.